Madam Chair, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good, that's better. Okay. I'm grateful to Valerie and to Hillary and the National Youth Council for inviting me to come and share my thoughts. And I know that Valerie especially wants me to cause some trouble. And I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I took a red pill yesterday, so I'm going to be different today. In terms of what I'm going to try and do today, I think there are two possible ways of going about this. One way is to be very dogmatic, to be very prescriptive in what I think, in what my research says, in what my practice say. Another way is just to be very relativist in that, everything is all right, everything is right. And I think a third possible way is that I invite you to a dialogue. I invite you towards a critical engagement where I share my thinking, but I also expect you to challenge my thinking, to challenge the concepts that I put before you, the research I put before you, to locate this discussion within your practice, and hopefully we can end up with a dialogue. That's what I'm hoping for. So I'm hoping today that I'll be able to highlight the different terminologies that I use to label this practice. Some call it global education or development education or a host of other things. So I want to share where I'm coming from there. I also want to share global education, global youth work models. What for other people, what are they saying it is? What is the model in Ireland? Is it different from the model in Europe, the model in Africa, the model that other people are using? So I'm hoping that I will actually share some of those conceptual models. I'm also, from my own experience, want to share what I would consider as the defining characteristics of global education or global youth work. I was in the youth university in Spain about 10 days ago, and there were probably about 300 people from all over the world, organized by the Council of Europe, the North-South Center. And they put 5 of us as trainers, and we all when people think that they're the best experts. So we spent the whole 2 days arguing as to who's got the best perspective, and we never got anything done. But one of the things that was a very big sticking point was should non-formal education be an integral part of global youth work or global education? And some people felt it has to be. Some people say it doesn't have to be. And we spend a lot of time arguing about that. And I think for me, I want to share, based on my experience, based on my research, based on my practice, what I feel some of these defining characteristics are. And you might tell me to go away and do something outside, but I'm happy to share that. But also, I want to provoke a critical reflection, and one of the questions that I will ask later on is that, is global education, is development education just a plaster that we stick on a wound to make ourselves better when we are not addressing the deep structural causes of grotesque inequality across the world in our own backyard? And that's one of the questions I want to reflect on as well. So what is it called? So many people call it so many different things. And in 2008, I did some research in the UK. In 2008, there were 50 universities that were delivering youth and community work courses across the UK. And out of the 50, I was able to interview 43 of them. And then they were either module leaders or program leaders for these youth and community work courses. And I asked them, this thing that you do that has got this global dimension, what is it called? So you could see the name from global education, mission-shaped practice, international youth work. There were so many names. And I think sometimes we don't get a common terminology. We don't get a common label about what we're talking about. The Council of Europe is very clear in calling it global education, and in a lot of European countries they talk about that. In terms of the formal education, people talk about global citizenship, So what the terminology can be compared to the concept because, or the process of whatever you're talking about. So I don't want to waste a lot of time because I have only got 20 minutes. I promised Valerie that I will actually stick to 20 minutes. So God help me. But the whole point is that it is called so many different things. And I don't want to get bogged down in the terminology. I want to move on more towards the process. And I think the Maastricht definition is something that I can see applying to most other practices, that global education is education that opens people's eyes and minds to the realities of the globalized world. And for me that is important because it talks about opening eyes and minds, and it also talks about not only opening eyes and minds, but also action towards something, towards global justice. So for me, this definition encompasses a lot of other definitions of whatever we call it, whether it's global education, global youth work, development education. And one of the problems that some people find with development education is that development education is based on the oppressive tablets of colonialism. And for some people, it has got a colonial connotation when you talk about development education. And that's one of the reasons I understand that the Development Education Association in England actually calls itself Think Global now. They've changed their name because some of us have been going at them and said, nah. So that's worth looking into. But for me, when you talk about global education, when you talk about youth work, and forgive me if I use these terms interchangeably, because we're talking about a process here, and I want to focus on that process. For me, global youth work or global education should be concerned with the process and concept of globalization. We talk about time and space and distance being conquered. We talk about an increasing interconnectedness between our lives and the lives of other people. You know, in the past, it would have been impossible to move $1 trillion, because $1 trillion is actually Mountain Everest times 120 times. You know, if you put up Mount Everest 120 times, and then that's how high, when you stack $1 trillion, that's how that would be. But you can move that at the click of a button. You know, in the 60s there were very few dedicated voice paths. Now there are millions. Yeah, so time and space and distance has been conquered. People are talking about the Ebola virus right now. And that has got implications for all of us. So there is not only a growing interconnectedness, but there is a consciousness of that. So for me, global education must address that interconnectedness. It must also be based on the principles of informal education or non-formal education or experiential learning, if you want to put it like that. It must kind of like promote consciousness and action. It's not only about kind of like raising awareness for me. Global education must go beyond that. Global youth work must go beyond that. It must be about, one, provoking consciousness so that people gain a new understanding, and two, supporting young people to take action. For me, there cannot be, and I'm being very, very open here and putting my goods out there, and I expect you to challenge them. I want you to disagree with them. In fact, I'll be disappointed if you don't disagree with me. But what I'm saying is, like, global education, global youth work must be based on promoting social justice. We live in in a world fraught with grotesque inequality, where there's a lot of structural violence. It's not only happening out there, it's also happening in here, you know, in our own backyards. There's a connection between the poverty levels in our own countries here in Ireland and the poverty levels and then the structures that generate that across the globe. And we need to be able to understand that, and we need to be able to challenge that in global education. And for me, the most important part is that it is located in people's everyday realities. You know, global youth work must connect with young people where they are, and then be able to strike them. Just wanted to share quickly a few conceptual models, because the DEA, now they are Think Global. They talk about global youth work or global education or development education being about connect, challenge, change. The idea is to connect with young people, with their realities within their territory, both literally and metaphorically. We talk about challenging them, challenging the things they know to be right and wrong, good and bad, challenging their construction of social reality, and then changing them, changing the way they perceive the world and therefore the way that they interact with the world. Another conceptual model is Woolley's conceptual model, which I like as well. And then, according to Woolley, global education or development education should be about exploring global issues. And when you explore global issues through global experiences, you can have a new global perspective. So, global issues, global experiences, global perspectives. For example, you can go to Gambia or you can go to India and you stay in your own room and then you eat your English breakfast or British breakfast or Irish breakfast and you watch your TV and you don't leave the room. So you have actually gone to another place, but you don't have a global experience. Yet you can put at the youth bay and you can stay there and explore some of those issues through role play or through other things, and you can have a global experience. So it's about how you generate all of these three dimensions to form global youth work. And then the North-South Center talk about, their view is that global youth work or global education or development education should be about inculcating a new set of values and attitudes, knowledge, so that people have an understanding of the world, people gain a consciousness of the world, and therefore they develop new skills to bring about change. So these are the three dimensions, according to the North-South Center, that is that global youth work or global education must be focused on. And when they talk about that, they also talk about making the connections. I mean, in a lot of my work, I use the term PLINKS, which stands for the personal, local, national, and global links. And I'll share my conceptual model in a bit. But the idea is that that the analysis of events, whatever is happening, should lead to a selection of specific team, and then recognizing the connection between the micro, the macro, and even at the measure level. How do you make this connection so that when you talk about the subprime mortgage crisis, you can understand how it impacts on house prices in Ireland. You can understand how it impacts on job prospects in Ireland. You can understand its impact on immigration in Ireland. When you look at the swine flu, which was explored in Mexico, you could see the impact it had on travel, on tourism, on even whether schools are open or not. If you look at the Ebola virus, you can understand the impact. If you look at the war on terror, you can understand the impact. The war that's happening in Syria right now, it's not only something that's happening out there, but you can understand how it's impacting the national level, how it's impacting some young people at the local level. Am I making sense? Are you still with me? Okay, good. For me, global education or global youth work should be about this. This is for me, this is what it all comes down to. We talk about the 5 phases of globalization. When we talk about globalization, it affects us at the personal level. It affects us technologically, politically, environmentally, economically, culturally. Yeah? And whatever we look at, it has got one of these impacts. If you look at the shoes that you're wearing, where they're made from, if you look at the label on your shirt, on your skirt, on your blouse, not now, and please keep them on. But if you look at that, then you can begin to see. If you look at the oil, the fuel that you consume, if you look at the food that you consume, you can begin to see this. Even the music you listen to, you rock, the beat you rock to, you can begin to see the kind of how that actually impacts on who you are and what you have. So for me, the 5 phases of globalization are actually affecting people at the personal level, at the local level, at the national level, at the global level. And global education or global youth work should be able to understand the links. What is happening economically in terms of the subprime mortgage crisis, in terms of jobs, in terms of the shift. 33% of people either live in China or India, yeah? And we talk about the rise of the Asian giant, the Asian tigers, and we've talked about also a lot of jobs moving, the market moving from Europe, where it's rested a lot, to new developments, which will impact on cost of living here. It's already impacting on cost of living. It will impact on job opportunities. It will impact on trading and trading partnerships. So whatever we look at, if you look at the music, if some of the young people, as Domad would say, are rocking to the beat of 50 Cent or whoever is new, Jay-Z or whoever, technologically, there is a big dimension of how that is a global phenomenon and how that is actually impacting on people, on how people dress, on the language they speak, on their attitude towards life. So you can look at all of these things. And for me, global youth work must explore that. Global youth work, because in this diagram I try to show the construction of social reality where the young people are at, or our target audience. And you've got the practitioner at the top. You can put them side by side if you feel like that. But if the practitioner is often constructed to be in a position of authority, then they're at the top and the young people are there. But you can invert it or put them side by side. And then you talk about young people's construction of reality. That becomes the way in which they understand the world, in terms of what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is just, and what is unjust, what is human rights, So all of these things, all of these notions are not devoid of human meaning making. All of these constructs are layers upon layers upon layers of experience that we have been socialized to accept. Paulo Freire talks a lot about the fact that we have been seduced by a defective logic, by the defective logic of the system. And how we've been socialized, how we've been normalized, allows us to see the world in a particular way. Yeah? And the basis on how we see the world is the basis on which we interact with the world. Yeah? So what becomes very consumerist approach to life can become normalized. Our attitudes towards poverty, our attitudes towards suffering, our attitude towards capital and a neoliberal agenda, which is based on making profit at all costs, regardless of the human cost. Our attitude towards all of these things about how we interact with, how we live our lives, are all things that are constructed. So what we do, the chair has just notified me that I'm out of time, and I'm sorry, Valerie, I'm not keeping my promise. Our job then is to try and deconstruct that reality so that we get the young people to look at another reality and therefore to interact with the people and the world in a different way. And then this can be at the individual level or at the collective level. And it is at the individual level we work with young people on a one-to-one. At the collective level, we work with young people, we work through their networks. And therefore, we try and provoke critical consciousness so that they get a better understanding of the factors and the forces that influence their life, not only at the personal, at the local, at the national, but also at the global level, and how this is a symbiotic process. Yeah? So this can be critical consciousness, the other one can be dormant consciousness. And the action can be at the playing levels. So in terms of global youth work, just this last bit, I did a piece of research in 2010 to 2012 that involved 1,197 young people from across the UK and also about 40 youth workers from across the UK. And one of the questions was what makes global youth work? And then, they talk about it's an informal and experiential learning, which is good. There's a stretching of the imagination, that there's the generation of curiosity, that people are able to be enthused to understand new ways of looking at the world. That also that young people are co-producers of knowledge. It's not something that is being done to them. And as Freda would say, it's not something that is based on domestication, but also on liberation. And also there is a symbiosis between action and consciousness. In concluding, for me, global youth work must be a catalyst to provoke consciousness and bring about change. It must be about provoking consciousness. And the title of my book, I'm not flogging by any chance, but the title of my book is Global Youth Work, Provoking Consciousness and Taking Action, shamelessly. But that's the whole point for me. It's about provoking consciousness and taking action. But also the question I asked earlier is that global youth work, is it like a plaster on a broken bone? Is it that an anesthetic that we inject on young people so that they can accept the system, that we can accept this normality that is so grotesque, that is so unfair, that accepts suffering as acceptable and inevitable? Is that what we're doing? We're injecting them with anesthetic every day so that they can actually keep them cool and be seduced by the system. I don't know, you answer that. Is it from the missionary position when we deliver youth work? And I know, I don't mean the one that you're talking about. I mean the other one. I'm talking about Christianizing and civilizing. Is global youth work all about Christianizing and civilizing people? You know, when we go to these countries, when we go to these other countries, and we engage them, what are we doing? Is it from a charity basis? The group of young people and Dermot make a very good point. Are we actually just reproducing these notions of inequality? Is our action based on that historical context? You know, global youth work is not out there. We're not only doing it to those people. Global youth work is what we're doing in here. It's actually how we're exploring what is happening with young people and how we deal with that. Thank you very much.